What's that? Who there? Whoa.
So the first one is growth. And so you've got this podcast that you do, The Founder's Journal, which is basically like your kind of personal diary, which I love. And one of the episodes on there that's my favorite is around growth. And you kind of broke down the growth playbook at different stages. And so you went through, and I'd love for you to kind of go through each one, but just to tee it up, there was kind of this hub and spoke kind of grassroots model when you were at Michigan. Then you had the then you had the ambassador program, then you had the referral program and some others. Do you want to just talk through, like, chronicling in stages, why do you think about deploying these different tactics and kind of what were the pros and cons of what worked with each one?
Yeah. And, one of the things that I would say is I think growth is really interesting and exciting to me because I think it is this perfect marriage of creativity with linear thinking. And what I mean by that is we didn't raise a lot of money for the business. And in the early days, we didn't have any money at all, right? And so we had to be very practical about how we thought about growing the thing. We basically had to say to ourselves, okay, we have, let's just say hypothetically, 1,000 subscribers now. The question was, how are we going to get to 2,000 subscribers? And we basically, I remember, created a list of what are all of the things that we could do that don't take any money to get from 1,000 to 2,000 subscribers. To me, like, that was the linear part of the process, was literally just reverse engineering. If we want to grow by 100% or 1,000 people, what are all the things we can do? What are the steps to get there? But then I would say that the more creative aspects were some of the things on the list, some of the things that we were thinking about to be able to grow the audience were things that were just like pretty out there that we hadn't heard done before. What we ended up finding in the early days of the business was the best model for thinking about growing the audience was, as you alluded to, this hub and spoke model. And honestly, like, I'm looking for a better name for it. So if you have a better name, let me know. But basically the idea is this: it's like you have a target audience whenever you're growing a product, right? So for Morning Brew, the target audience at the time was the college student who's interested in business. Now it's broadened out to be the modern business leader, someone who's a little bit older than just a college student who is working in business or adjacent to business. And so what we asked ourselves was, for the college student who's interested in business, what are the hubs that are attached to a concentration of spokes, the spokes being like the actual end consumer? So basically, what are the hubs, what are the things we can get in front of that if we get the attention of them, they can be the best megaphone to getting a large group of our end reader? And so when we thought about that, the example that we started with was classes in college or clubs in college, right? Quite literally, like, the hub is the professor, or the hub is like the club president, where if you can get their attention and you can convince them to let you talk to their spokes, their students, their club members, you have the opportunity to convert not just one, but many people to your product at once. And so that's what we focused on at first, was like professors and club presidents were our hubs in the early days. Austin and I literally we just hustled to get into every business class or business adjacent class, like econ, stats, poli-sci, and convinced professors to let us give our little spiel for 2 minutes at the beginning of every class. We did the same thing for clubs. And literally all we did is we gave the brew pitch, we story told the brew. We said, if you want to sign up, we're going to pass around a sheet of paper. You're going to write down your email address with pen and paper. We're going to add your email address and you'll get the newsletter the next day. And if you don't get it, and if you don't like it, you can always choose to unsubscribe. And we almost, the goal of the pitch was like, remove any possible downside or risk of subscribing, where people feel candidly like idiots for not subscribing since there's no downside. And that's what we did. We just did that over and over and over. And we ended up having people use a sheet of paper and a pen to write it down, because we found that that was far more successful than telling people to take out their laptops and type in morningbrew.com and then put in their email address. It added steps to the process, and that friction would decrease the conversion rate of percentage of people in the class that would actually sign up. And so we did that for a long time. And then, the next step of the growth process was to ask ourselves, okay, we've done this, in 20 classes at Michigan and 20 clubs at Michigan. How do we grow beyond that? And so that was kind of like literally like the first growth strategy when we launched Morning Brew.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I would think of it as like, I like hub and spoke. I think of it as like a train the trainer or like a sell the seller model. So like you get those advocates or those influencers essentially. I love that though. Yeah. And so you went from that and then you did this ambassador program, which I have to commend you guys because it seems like looking back, a lot of people have done ambassador, a lot of people have done referral, but you guys were one of the first to do both of those things, I feel like, especially in media. And so do you want to talk about just like how you set those up and what worked within with each of those?
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting because to your point, even to this day, I haven't seen that many media brands that have actually done a college ambassador program, right? Like I've never seen a college ambassador for the New York Times. I've never seen like a referrer for the Washington Post. Not to say those aren't great publications, but it's just interesting to your point. Like when I think of, what are the biggest ambassador programs in the world? It's like, what comes to mind first for me is like Red Bull or like the app, whatever the new social media app on campus is. And so for us, I mean, I think that speaks to one of the advantages that we had in the early days is that Austin and I were first-time entrepreneurs. And so we didn't have these preconceived notions around like how we should grow. It was more that we had no resources. We have to grow. How can we do it? And whatever's most effective, let's just keep doing that. And so we basically said to ourselves, okay, we did this thing at Michigan with pitching classes on our own. It was really effective. How do we do that at other schools? And right, like when we said that, we weren't thinking to ourselves, media companies haven't done this before, let's not do it. We simply said to ourselves, this worked at Michigan, why wouldn't we do it elsewhere? So then we expanded out to like the Big Ten, right? So we got ambassadors from Indiana, Wisconsin, Maryland, etc. And basically we found the Austin and the Alex at those schools, had them literally do the same exact thing. And we rewarded them with like swag and like accolades and like recommendations on LinkedIn, like the things that we thought would motivate them. And that we to this day still do the ambassador program. I would say not that it's lost its importance over time, but it's tough to have it mean as much as you reach a certain scale. With Morning Brew at, on the main newsletter, 2.7 million subscribers now, getting 20,000 subscribers from college campuses is great, but obviously as a proportion, it means less than it did when we had 20,000 subscribers total. And so we had the ambassador program for a while. It was a huge growth driver in the early days of the business. And then we had that next iteration, right? Which was like, at first it was, how do we scale Austin and Alex? And then it was, how do we scale beyond just colleges? Because we have readers outside of colleges that also really care about the brew, that also feel affinity for it. How do we scale to them? And that's when we introduced the referral program, which again, like, we didn't come up with the referral program. The referral program already existed. I would say, if anything, we came up with it for doing it in a media context because we hadn't seen a lot of media companies do that. But literally, the idea of referring or being an affiliate has existed for so long. Like, I think about every time that I go to Uber, it's like refer someone, get $5, or they get $5, you get $5. And so for us, all we did was we saw that Harry's Razors had a ton of success with their referral program when they launched their business. If you go on like Tim Ferriss's blog, there's a whole write-up about before Harry's Razors launched, they had their landing page. You put your email address in, and if you refer other people to put their email addresses in as well, you can earn more rewards like free razors, free shaving cream, etc. And they collected 100,000 emails through doing that. That was exciting to us. And so then what we ended up doing was we literally went on Upwork and we found an engineer in Ohio who coincidentally had been asked by 4 other businesses to just copy the Harry's Razors landing page tech. And so he had already done it. He charged us $500. It probably took him like an hour to do it since he had already built the code for it. And that was like the origin of our referral program, was literally just taking the foundation of what Harry's Razors did, but applying it into the context of Morning Brew, which meant instead of they have a woolly mammoth on their page. We had our background. And instead of razors and shaving cream, we had our rewards that would incentivize our readers.
Yeah, I love it. So it's so grassroots. I think so. What you were hitting at and that I was talking about is you were the first to do it in like a media way. And I think to your point, there's been a lot of unique referral programs, and it seems like the first time a company does it in a space a certain way, that's when it's super effective. They squeeze most of the juice out of the lemon, and then people just try to clone it. You guys seemed like one of the first people to do it in media, which was cool. And the question I had though is, so one of your early rewards, I think is really smart, was like access to more content, which was zero marginal cost for you. That's key. But then a lot of your other rewards definitely weren't free, like the crew neck and the mug and stuff. And so were you revenue producing, or had you raised at that point to cover that? Or like how, because you can imagine someone in the early days, how would they offer that referral piece without kind of a revenue producing asset?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm trying to remember the exact sequencing of it. My guess is when we first launched the referral program, we probably weren't doing the crew neck at that period of time, because crew necks are generally one of the more expensive referral rewards we have. Mugs are actually super cheap. I think we pay 20 cents a mug or something, because ceramic is really cheap. Stickers are really cheap. I think stickers like 15 cents a sticker. Before we had raised money, so before we started making money, we raised a little money. We raised $750,000 from family and friends. Before that, we were either funding the business out of our pockets, or what we, again, just like being scrappy and having resources in college, Austin and I applied to like every grant program and every entrepreneurship competition at Michigan. So in total, we probably got, like, if I had to guess, somewhere between $25,000 and $40,000 in grant money and competition money. My guess is we had launched the referral program before raising money, and some of that was supported by the grant money that we had won from Michigan. And then once we raised money for the brew, which was in early 2017, that was what allowed us to start hiring people to make better content, to grow the audience in a more scalable way, and to hire salespeople to ultimately start selling the brew. And that's what created that virtuous cycle of, we can sell the brew to advertisers because they want to get in front of modern business leaders. That allowed us to start getting the revenue flywheel going by having more money. That allowed us to then hire more people or spend money on paid marketing. And that's what started getting the flywheel going in our business.
Yeah, then you were cooking. I mean, 40,000, you could buy a lot of mugs with that. You guys probably were thinking like, oh, if someone refers 50 people for the crew neck, like we'll just put it on there. If they get to 50, like then something's going right, so we'll figure out how to cover it or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we probably generally weren't thinking about it smart enough in the early days of like, if we buy these rewards, is that actually going to be like a money-making endeavor for us when we ultimately monetize the business? I think we were more just thinking about all that matters is getting quality people onto the list. Like, I don't think we thought about it in a really sophisticated way at the time of like, what is the LTV of our audience? What is the CAC of our audience? What is the ratio of CAC and LTV to our audience? I think we were just like, we just want to keep growing this thing, and we're going to try to do it as low cost as possible, if not no cost. But yeah, I think we were just really scrappy in the early days. And my guess is also we did a lot of things that weren't swag related in the early days. Like, as I think back to it, a big thing that we did, especially for ambassadors, were things like doing resume reviews and doing like mock interviews and actually making it like career development related, where if you get a certain number of referrals, we help you in like your career search. And like, I can't tell you, hundreds of people on their LinkedIn profiles have recommendations from me saying how they were great ambassadors, because that was one of the rewards, was like kind of this canned answer for recommending someone because they were a great ambassador in our program.